Hello, my friend. Tonight we're going on a journey, a quiet adventure back in time to a world often misunderstood, a world before TikTok, before air conditioning, and certainly before anyone ever uttered the phrase work-life balance. We're going to explore what life was really like for women in Native American tribes, a life so far removed from your cozy bed and streaming services that, honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a single week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine for a moment, you wake with the sun, not to an alarm but to the gentle chirping of birds and the subtle shift in light filtering through a tipi or longhouse. There's no snooze button, no hitting refresh on your social feed. Your day, every single day, begins with an immediate connection to the earth and the needs of your community. For women in many Native American tribes, this wasn't just a quaint idea, it was the bedrock of existence. You see, the popular image of Native American women, often portrayed as silent, subservient figures in historical dramas, couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, their lives were incredibly diverse, rich with purpose, and profoundly influential, varying significantly across the hundreds of distinct nations and regions that made up pre-colonial North America. You wouldn't have just one job here, you'd have a dozen. Think of your modern multitasking, then amplify it by about 1,000, subtract all convenience technology, and add the very real stakes of survival. From the fertile fields of the agricultural societies in the east to the vast plains where buffalo roamed, women were the backbone, the glue, the essential engine of their communities. Historians still argue whether the degree of influence was universal across all tribes, but the fact of their vital contributions is undeniable. Let's take, for instance, the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, in what is now upstate New York. Here, you'd find a society where matrilineal lineage wasn't just a concept, it was the concept. Your identity, your clan, your social standing, it all flowed through your mother's line. And it wasn't just about names on a family tree. In these nations, clan mothers held immense power. They owned the longhouses, they controlled the distribution of food, and get this, they had the authority to select and even remove chiefs. Imagine your grandmother having the power to fire the mayor. That's a pretty strong argument against the passive figure stereotype, isn't it? It certainly puts a different spin on family gatherings. But even beyond these explicit power structures, the daily economic contributions of women were staggering. If you were a woman in an agricultural tribe, you'd be the primary cultivator. You'd know the cycles of the moon, the nuances of the soil, the precise moment to plant corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters that formed the dietary staple for so many. You'd be the one nurturing these plants from seed to harvest, often employing sophisticated techniques like companion planting long before modern agriculture caught on. It's a far cry from clicking add to cart for your organic produce. And it wasn't just farming. You'd be an expert forager, knowing every edible root, berry, and herb in your territory. You'd identify medicinal plants, with an almost encyclopedic knowledge, remedies passed down through generations. Imagine knowing which leaf could soothe a fever, which bark could mend a wound. It's like having a pharmacy in your backyard, only without the helpful pharmacist explaining side effects. This deep ecological knowledge wasn't just a hobby, it was a matter of life and death for your family and tribe. Even in plains tribes, where the thunder of buffalo herds dominated life, women's roles were equally crucial, just different. While men hunted the massive animals, it was the women who processed every single part of the kill. You'd be responsible for skinning, tanning hides until they were soft as silk, preparing the meat for drying and preservation, and even crafting tools and clothing from bone, sinew, and fur. They say waste not, want not, and in this context, it was an absolute mantra. Every piece had a purpose. You'd be turning a buffalo hide into a tipi cover, a pair of moccasins, or a winter robe. Try doing that with your latest Amazon delivery. So, while your ancestors might have been figuring out how to build a decent outhouse or debating the merits of feudalism, Native American women were designing entire sustainable systems. Their contributions weren't just helpful, they were absolutely essential. They weren't merely wives or mothers. They were farmers, architects, healers, artists, and often political forces in their own right. And that, my friend, is just the beginning of understanding what life was really like. As the sun climbed higher, your day wouldn't slow down. It would simply shift gears. The morning might see you in the fields, your hands deep in the soil, planting or weeding with rhythmic efficiency. But by midday, perhaps you'd be engaged in a completely different set of tasks, all equally critical. Unlike your modern existence, where work often feels separate from life, for these women, every activity was interwoven with the survival and thriving of their community. This wasn't just about personal gain, it was about collective well-being. You were a vital cog in a meticulously balanced ecosystem, both natural and social. Take, for example, the relentless process of food preparation beyond the harvest. You wouldn't just pick berries, you'd dry them for winter. You wouldn't just harvest corn, you'd grind it into meal, a laborious process often involving heavy stone tools. Imagine standing for hours, rhythmically pounding corn, your muscles aching, knowing that every single grain meant sustenance for your family through the harsh winter months. This wasn't a quaint artisanal activity for Instagram. This was pure, unadulterated necessity. And historians still debate whether the sheer caloric output required for these daily tasks truly outweighed the nutritional intake, a testament to the strenuous nature of their lives. Then there's the water. No taps, no purification plants. You'd likely spend a significant part of your day fetching water from a nearby stream or river, carrying heavy vessels back to your dwelling. Depending on the terrain and the season, this could be a considerable trek, often multiple times a day. You might even have to break through ice in winter. It's enough to make you appreciate every single drip from your kitchen faucet, isn't it? Try going a day without running water. It's a surprisingly humbling experience. And what about the constant need for firewood? Keeping a fire burning for cooking, warmth, and light was an ongoing chore. You'd be out gathering fallen branches, perhaps even helping to fell smaller trees, hauling them back to camp. Every meal, every warm night, depended on your ability to find and transport fuel. It was a never-ending cycle of gathering, preparing, and sustaining, a direct connection to the raw elements of nature. You truly couldn't order in if you were feeling peckish. Beyond these fundamental survival tasks, women were also the primary craftswomen and producers of goods essential for daily life. Think about every basket, every clay pot, every woven mat. These weren't factory-made, they were handmade, often by you, with immense skill and patience. From gathering the raw materials, clay from a riverbed, reeds from a swamp, fibers from plants, to the intricate process of shaping, drying, firing, or weaving, each item was a testament to your expertise and tireless effort. A single functional pot could take days, even weeks to create, and it would be cherished and used until it literally fell apart. For instance, in many Pueblo communities, pottery was an art form and a practical necessity almost exclusively practiced by women. They'd use techniques passed down for generations, creating vessels that were not only beautiful, but also incredibly durable for cooking and storage. The designs often held deep spiritual meaning, making each piece a narrative in itself. You wouldn't just be making a bowl, you'd be crafting a piece of history and spirituality. And if you belonged to a tribe that relied on animal hides for clothing and shelter, you'd be a master of tanning. This wasn't a quick trip to the leather shop. This involved hours of scraping, soaking, stretching, and often smoking the hides until they were supple and waterproof. It's a messy, physically demanding process that smells, well, let's just say it smells natural. But the result was warm, durable clothing and sturdy coverings for tipis or lodges. Remember that mention of processing buffalo in the Plains tribes? This was a huge part of it. The survival of your family through biting winds and freezing temperatures literally depended on your skill at turning an animal skin into protective gear. It makes buying a winter coat feel remarkably unheroic. Even your leisure time, which was scarce, often involved productive activities. Storytelling might accompany the intricate work of beadwork, quillwork, or weaving, transforming simple materials into objects of beauty and cultural significance. These weren't just decorative. They often encoded tribal histories, spiritual beliefs, and social status. So, while you might be relaxing your mind, your hands were still busy contributing to the cultural and material wealth of your community. This constant, varied workload instilled an incredible sense of purpose and resilience. You were not a passive observer of your life. You were an active participant, a creator, a provider. Every aching muscle, every blistered hand, was a testament to your essential role. The daily grind wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving as a collective, building a rich, complex culture through effort, ingenuity, and an unwavering connection to the land and each other. With the sun nearing its zenith, your focus would inevitably turn to the most fundamental of all human needs, food. But remember, this isn't a world of supermarkets or even corner stores. Every single morsel of sustenance, every berry, every root, every piece of meat required immense effort, specialized knowledge, and often incredible patience. This was a direct, visceral relationship with your environment, where farm to table meant your own hands in the dirt and often a long trek to gather. You couldn't just have a sudden craving for sushi. You'd have to catch the fish, prepare the rice, and probably invent the soy sauce yourself. In many Native American tribes, agriculture was predominantly a woman's domain. While men might clear fields, the meticulous, season-long work of planting, nurturing, and harvesting fell to you. You'd be intimately familiar with the cycles of corn, beans, and squash, knowing precisely when to sow and when to reap. Imagine the delicate touch required to plant a tiny corn seed, or the back-breaking work of hilling up soil around growing plants, protecting them from wind and pests. This wasn't just gardening. It was the strategic management of your tribe's primary food source, often providing the majority of their calories for the year. This deep agricultural knowledge was passed down from mother to daughter, a living textbook of sustainable farming practices. But what if your tribe wasn't primarily agricultural? If you were part of a nomadic or semi-nomadic group, perhaps in the Great Basin or parts of the Southwest, your expertise would shift to foraging. This wasn't a casual stroll through the woods picking pretty flowers. This was systematic, informed by generations of accumulated wisdom. You'd know which plants were edible and when, which were poisonous, and which possessed medicinal properties. You'd gather wild rice, nuts, berries, roots, and seeds, processing them into flour, oils, or dried provisions. Imagine knowing precisely where to find a patch of camas root, or how to properly leach acorns to remove their bitter tannins, turning them into a nutritious, storable food source. This wasn't just about finding food. It was about transforming it into usable, safe sustenance. And historians still debate the exact caloric contributions of foraging versus hunting in different tribal diets, highlighting the often underestimated significance of women's gathering efforts. Let's not forget the incredible innovation involved in food preservation. Without refrigeration, you'd become a master of drying, smoking, and caching. Meat, berries, and vegetables would be carefully prepared to last through lean seasons. Think of pemmican, a superfood of the Plains tribes, dried meat pounded with rendered fat and often mixed with berries. This nutritious, calorie-dense food could last for years and was often prepared by women. It's like the ultimate survival bar, only made with way more elbow grease and buffalo. Your ability to prepare and store food wasn't just about avoiding hunger. It was about ensuring the tribe's survival through harsh winters or unexpected periods of scarcity. And then there's the nuanced art of resource management. You wouldn't just gather, you'd gather sustainably. You'd know not to overharvest from one area, ensuring that the bounty would return year after year. This inherent understanding of ecological balance was a core part of Native American lifeways, often guided by women who understood the land as a living entity, a provider to be respected and nurtured. It's a concept that many modern societies are still struggling to fully grasp. Consider the diverse examples. In the Pacific Northwest, while men might fish for salmon, women were crucial in preparing and smoking vast quantities of the fish for storage, ensuring year-round access to this vital protein source. In the Southwest, women meticulously tended cornfields, but also harvested wild agave, roasting it in pits for days to create a sweet, fibrous food. Each region, each ecosystem, demanded a unique set of skills and knowledge, and consistently, it was the women who held the keys to unlocking its edible treasures. So, while the men might bring in the game, it was often the women who transformed it into food, clothing, tools, and shelter. Their roles in economic production were not merely supplementary, they were foundational. Without the women's knowledge of plants, their agricultural prowess, their preservation techniques, and their relentless daily labor, many tribes would simply not have survived. You were, quite literally, the gatekeepers of nourishment, ensuring that the belly of the community remained full and strong. As the sun began its gentle descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, your work wouldn't cease. While securing food was paramount, creating and maintaining the very structures you lived in your home was another fundamental responsibility, often resting squarely on your shoulders. This wasn't just about having a roof overhead. It was about crafting a resilient, adaptable shelter that could withstand the elements and provide comfort, a true engineering feat without power tools or prefabricated parts. You couldn't just call a contractor. You were the contractor, the architect, and the labor force. Consider the diverse types of dwellings across native North America. Whether it was the tipi of the plains, the longhouse of the northeast, the wigwam of the woodlands, or the adobe pueblos of the southwest, women were central to their construction and maintenance. This wasn't a one-time build. These homes required constant attention, repairs, and often dismantling and reassembling as tribes moved with the seasons or for resources. Let's imagine you're with a plains tribe. The tipi, iconic and seemingly simple, was a marvel of portable architecture, and its primary builders and owners were women. After a successful buffalo hunt, men would bring back the hides, but it was you who would meticulously tan them, sew them together with sinew, and then erect the massive, conical structure. The hides, once sewn, could be incredibly heavy, requiring significant strength and teamwork to raise onto the pole framework. Imagine wrestling with several large, cured buffalo hides in the wind, trying to get them just right. It's a bit more involved than assembling flat-pack furniture, wouldn't you agree? And it wasn't just the initial construction. Tipis needed constant care. You'd adjust the smoke flaps at the top to manage ventilation, especially during cooking fires. You'd retension the ropes as the hides expanded and contracted with humidity. When the tribe moved, as plains tribes often did to follow the buffalo, it was primarily the women who would dismantle the teepee, pack it onto travois, a type of sled pulled by dogs or horses, and then re-erect it at the new camp. This happened frequently, sometimes every few days or weeks, making you an expert in rapid deployment housing. Historians still debate the precise division of labour in all aspects of tipi construction and transport, but the central role of women is universally acknowledged. Now, shift your gaze to the northeast, to the Haudenosaunee. Their homes were longhouses, massive communal structures made from wood and bark, sometimes stretching over 100 feet long and housing multiple families from the same clan. While men typically felled the large trees for the main framework, it was women who gathered the bark, often elm or cedar, and meticulously fastened it to the frame to create the walls and roof. This involved climbing, cutting, and securing large, unwieldy sheets of bark, often using rope and ingenuity. The longhouse was more than just a dwelling. It was the heart of the matrilineal clan, owned and managed by the clan mothers, giving them ultimate authority over who lived where and how resources within the house were distributed. Talk about having a say in your living arrangements. Even in the Southwest, where adobe pueblos were built from sun-dried bricks of earth, women played a crucial role. While men might mix the adobe and lay the foundations, women were often responsible for plastering the walls, both inside and out, using a mix of clay, water, and sometimes straw. This plastering wasn't just cosmetic. It protected the adobe bricks from erosion and helped regulate the interior temperature. They'd also maintain the flat roofs, which often served as additional living or working spaces. You wouldn't just be doing upkeep, you'd be maintaining the integrity of a multi-story building. Beyond the main dwelling, women were also responsible for creating and maintaining the interior comforts. This included weaving mats for sleeping and sitting, crafting storage containers from various natural materials, and generally organizing the living space to be efficient and comfortable. Every tool, every blanket, every cooking utensil, many of these were made or maintained by you. The domestic sphere, far from being trivial, was a hub of constant production and careful management, ensuring the well-being and functionality of the entire household. So, whether you were raising a tipi under the vast prairie sky, meticulously bark-cladding a longhouse, or carefully plastering an adobe wall, your hands were actively shaping the physical world of your community. Your skills ensured warmth, shelter, and security for your family, day in and day out. It makes modern homeownership seem like a walk in the park, doesn't it? As twilight softened the edges of the camp, your thoughts, and indeed your hands, would still be busy with another fundamental aspect of survival and expression: clothing and personal comfort. Forget fast fashion. Every single thread, every bead, every piece of leather you wore was a testament to hours, days, sometimes even weeks, of painstaking labor. This wasn't about following trends. It was about protecting yourself from the elements, signifying your identity, and honoring the materials gifted by the natural world. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer effort involved in creating a single outfit. If you were a woman of the plains, the journey from raw hide to a finished dress or pair of moccasins was epic. It started with the aforementioned tanning process, transforming tough animal skins, buffalo, deer, elk, into soft, pliable leather. This wasn't just physical labor. It was a sensory experience. The smell of brains or wood smoke used in the curing process. The feel of the hide as it slowly softened under your relentless scraping and stretching. It's a bit more involved than swiping your credit card online, isn't it? Once the hides were perfectly supple, the real artistry began. You would cut and sew them using bone awls and sinew thread, often incorporating intricate patterns that were not just decorative but also carried deep cultural meaning. A stitch wasn't just a stitch. It was part of a larger story, a family tradition, or a tribal identifier. And then came the embellishment. Beadwork, quillwork, and shell adornments weren't just pretty additions. They were vibrant expressions of identity, status, and spiritual connection. Think about quillwork. Before glass beads became widely available through trade, porcupine quills were a primary decorative medium. Imagine gathering dozens, perhaps hundreds, of sharp quills, then meticulously softening, dyeing, and flattening them before patiently stitching them onto leather or bark. Each quill had to be individually worked, then folded and sewn down with incredible precision to create geometric patterns or narrative scenes. It was a slow, meditative process that demanded immense focus and a steady hand. Historians still debate the specific origins of many of the intricate patterns, highlighting the depth of this artistic tradition. It really makes you appreciate your machine-washed, mass-produced t-shirt, doesn't it? Even the simplest items, like blankets or wraps, required significant effort. If your tribe practiced weaving, you would be involved in gathering and processing plant fibers, spinning them into thread, and then painstakingly weaving them on a loom. This could be a backstrap loom, where your own body tensioned the warp threads, or a larger upright loom, creating beautiful, durable textiles for warmth, carrying goods, or ceremonial purposes. The patterns woven into these textiles were often unique to your tribe or clan, serving as visual markers of identity and skill. And it wasn't just clothing for yourself. You were responsible for dressing your entire family, from infancy to old age. Imagine creating dozens of moccasins over a lifetime, each pair perfectly fitted and robust enough to withstand endless walking over varied terrain. Each piece of clothing, each bag, each pouch you made was not merely functional, it was imbued with care, purpose, and cultural significance. You wouldn't discard a worn-out item casually. You might repair it, repurpose it, or respectfully return it to the earth. This constant creation of textiles and adornments wasn't just a chore, it was a deeply ingrained part of a woman's identity and contribution to the community's well-being. Your skill in these areas brought respect, and your creations showcased the beauty and resilience of your culture. It was a tangible way to express love, creativity, and dedication. So, the next time you slip on your favorite comfortable clothes, take a moment to imagine the world in which every fiber, every stitch, told a story woven by hand, patience, and absolute necessity. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, another profound aspect of a woman's life would come to the fore: motherhood. This wasn't merely a biological function. It was the sacred duty of raising the next generation, ensuring the continuity, strength, and cultural integrity of the tribe. You were not just a parent, you were a primary educator, a cultural guide, and a protector, shaping the future of your entire community. Imagine the sheer physical demands of childbirth in a world without modern medicine. While tribes often had skilled midwives and extensive knowledge of herbal remedies to assist, the process was inherently risky. Yet, life continued, and the birth of a child was a moment of profound joy and communal significance. From the moment a new life entered the world, you, as a mother, embarked on a journey of constant vigilance and nurturing. Infancy was a period of intense physical closeness. Many Native American cultures practiced co-sleeping and on-demand feeding, fostering a deep bond between mother and child. Babies were often carried in cradle boards, expertly crafted to be both comfortable for the infant and practical for the mother, allowing you to continue your daily tasks foraging, preparing food, crafting, while keeping your baby secure and close. This wasn't just a convenience, it was a constant, intimate connection, teaching the child from birth about the rhythms and sounds of tribal life. It's a far cry from the separate nurseries and elaborate baby monitors of today, isn't it? As children grew, your role shifted from purely physical care to intensive education. Every activity you engaged in became a teaching moment. While you were gathering berries, you would teach your child which ones were safe to eat and which were poisonous, instilling vital knowledge about the natural world. While tanning a hide, you would demonstrate the precise movements and tools, laying the foundation for practical skills they would need as adults. This wasn't abstract learning from textbooks. It was hands-on, experiential, and directly relevant to survival and cultural continuity. Girls, in particular, would shadow their mothers and other female relatives, learning everything from agricultural practices and cooking to crafting and healing arts. They learned by observation, participation, and gentle guidance, absorbing centuries of accumulated knowledge. There were no designated classrooms. The entire world was their school, and you were the primary instructor. This constant apprenticeship ensured that vital skills and cultural traditions were passed down seamlessly from one generation to the next. Historians still debate the specific pedagogical approaches used in different tribes, but the effectiveness of this immersive learning is clear. Beyond practical skills, you were also responsible for instilling the tribe's values, ethics, and spiritual beliefs. Through storytelling, song, and daily example, you would teach your children about respect for elders, reverence for nature, the importance of community, and their place within the spiritual universe. These were not just bedtime stories. They were moral compasses, guiding principles for living a good and honorable life. The puberty ceremony for girls, often a significant rite of passage in many tribes, marked her transition into womanhood and readiness for adult responsibilities, including potential motherhood. For example, among the Apache, a girl's puberty ceremony was a profound event, symbolizing her acceptance of her role as a woman and invoking blessings of long life and fertility. These ceremonies were often led by elder women, underscoring the intergenerational wisdom and support systems in place. Motherhood, therefore, was a deeply respected and central role within Native American societies. Your ability to nurture, educate, and guide your children directly impacted the future well-being and resilience of the entire tribe. It wasn't just about individual families, it was about the collective survival and flourishing of a people. You were, in essence, an architect of human potential, building the very foundations of your society through the lives you nurtured. It's a responsibility that makes every other task seem almost trivial by comparison. As the evening shadows deepened, perhaps a cool breeze rustled through the leaves outside your dwelling, you might reflect on something profound about your society. The very fabric of its identity often ran through you: the women. This wasn't a patriarchal world where power exclusively flowed through men. In many Native American tribes, matrilineal lines were not just a social structure, but a bedrock of power, heritage, and influence. This meant your mother's lineage and yours determined your clan, your social standing, and often your political voice. It's a system that truly flipped the script on many historical norms you might be familiar with. Imagine living in a society where descent and inheritance were traced through the female line. This was common among numerous tribes, including the Haudenosaunee, Iroquois, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Hopi, and many Pueblo peoples. In these societies, property, homes, and even certain ceremonial items were often owned by women or by the female lineage. When a man married, he might move into his wife's family longhouse or dwelling. His children would belong to her clan, not his. This wasn't just a quirky custom. It had profound implications for a woman's status and autonomy. You weren't merely marrying into a family, you were remaining firmly rooted in your own, with your female relatives as your anchor. Take the Haudenosaunee Confederacy again, a remarkable example of a highly organized and powerful matrilineal society. Here, the clan mothers, elder women revered for their wisdom and experience, held immense political authority. They were responsible for selecting the male chiefs, sachems, who would represent the clan on the Grand Council. More importantly, they had the power to depose a chief if he failed to act in the best interests of his people. This effectively gave women a veto power over the highest political decisions. It's a system that makes modern political appointments look positively quaint. You were not just a voter, you were a kingmaker, or rather, a chiefmaker. This matri-focused structure extended to daily life. In a longhouse, it was the elder women who managed the household, controlled the communal food stores, and ensured harmony among the multiple families living under one roof. Your voice in these communal decisions would carry significant weight because your lineage was the foundation of the home itself. This meant that while men might be visible as warriors or hunters, the invisible, steady hand guiding the community often belonged to the women. Historians still argue whether the term matriarchy truly applies to all aspects of these societies, but the significant power and respect afforded to women are undeniable. Even outside strictly matrilineal systems, women often held considerable informal influence. Their roles as providers, educators, and spiritual leaders meant their opinions were highly valued in tribal councils and decision-making processes. In many plains tribes, for example, while men were the primary hunters and warriors, women often owned the types and their contents, giving them a form of property ownership and control that was rare in many other parts of the world at the time. Their collective voice could influence camp movements, treaty negotiations, and even decisions about war and peace. This emphasis on female lineage provided a strong support system. You would grow up surrounded by your mother, grandmothers, aunts and sisters, a formidable network of experienced women who offered guidance, shared responsibilities, and provided unwavering support. This communal child-rearing and shared labor lessened the burden on individual mothers and fostered a sense of collective strength and identity. It wasn't just it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a powerful female lineage to ensure the strength of the tribe. So, while your perception of ancient societies might be dominated by male-centric power structures, the reality for many Native American women was strikingly different. You were born into a legacy of power, responsibility, and deep respect, where your bloodline was the very thread weaving together the fabric of your community. It's a quiet strength, often overlooked in historical narratives, but one that profoundly shaped the lives and destinies of millions. As the night deepened, and perhaps a crackling fire provided the only illumination, your world would also encompass a profound dimension beyond the tangible, the spiritual. For women in Native American tribes, spirituality wasn't a separate, Sunday-only activity. It was woven into the very fabric of daily life, connecting them to the earth, the ancestors, and the unseen forces that shaped their existence. You weren't just a participant in ceremonies, you were often a sacred keeper, a conduit, and a vital figure in maintaining cosmic balance. In many, though not all, Native American cultures, women held significant spiritual roles, often serving as healers, ceremonial leaders, visionaries, and storytellers. Their unique connection to the cycles of life, birth, and creation often positioned them as powerful figures in the spiritual landscape. This wasn't about dogma. It was about relationship, a deeply personal and communal bond with the spiritual world that permeated every aspect of their being. Consider the role of women as keepers of sacred knowledge and ceremonies. Many spiritual practices involved specific songs, dances, rituals, and stories that have been passed down through generations. Women were often the primary custodians of this oral tradition, ensuring that the wisdom of the ancestors was preserved and accurately transmitted to the young. Imagine memorizing vast narratives, complex songs, and intricate ceremonial procedures, knowing that the spiritual well-being of your entire community depended on your memory and devotion. It's a bit more pressure than remembering your Netflix password, isn't it? In some tribes, women were integral to the performance of major ceremonies. For example, among the Hopi, women played crucial roles in agricultural rituals, particularly those focused on corn, which was seen as a sacred mother. They were responsible for tending the corn physically, but also spiritually, ensuring its fertility and abundance through prayer, song, and ritual. These weren't just symbolic gestures. They were seen as direct interactions with the forces that sustained life. Historians still debate the precise interpretations of these gendered spiritual roles, but the intertwining of female identity with agricultural and life-giving forces is widely acknowledged. Furthermore, women often served as spiritual advisors, dream interpreters, and visionaries. Their insights and connection to the spirit world were highly valued, and their counsel sought in times of crisis or uncertainty. They might interpret dreams that guided tribal decisions, or embark on personal vision quests that brought spiritual power and direction to the community. This often meant spending time alone in nature, fasting and praying, seeking guidance from the spirits. It's a level of introspection and spiritual commitment rarely seen in our modern, bustling world. The sacredness of life, particularly new life, often placed women at the center of birth and naming ceremonies. As givers of life, mothers and grandmothers often had special spiritual authority in these significant transitions. Their wisdom guided the spiritual protection and integration of new tribal members, ensuring they were welcomed and blessed by both the human and spirit worlds. This was a profound responsibility, connecting them directly to the mysteries of creation. Even the objects women created often held spiritual significance. The patterns in a woven basket, the designs on a painted pot, the intricate beadwork on a ceremonial garment, these weren't just aesthetics. They often depicted sacred symbols, mythical beings, or cosmological maps, infusing everyday objects with spiritual power. You weren't just crafting, you were imbuing the material world with the sacred. It's like every creation was a small prayer, a tangible connection to the divine. So, while the men might engage in their own spiritual practices, perhaps focused on hunting or warfare, the spiritual landscape of many Native American tribes was rich with female presence and power. Your role wasn't just complementary, it was often foundational, connecting the physical world with the sacred, nurturing the spirit of the community, and ensuring its harmony with the universe. It's a profound legacy of spiritual stewardship, a quiet strength that underpinned their entire existence. As the spiritual calm of the night might settle around you, another vital dimension of a woman's contribution would become apparent: her role as a healer. In a world devoid of hospitals, pharmacies, or even basic germ theory, women were often the primary custodians of health, possessing an encyclopedic knowledge of the natural world and its curative properties. You weren't just a caregiver, you were a vital part of the healing arts, often the first, and sometimes the only, physician your community had. Imagine needing to treat a fever, a snake bite, a broken bone, or a debilitating cough, with nothing but the plants around you and the wisdom passed down through generations. This was the reality, and Native American women rose to this challenge with remarkable skill and dedication. Their expertise in herbal medicine was profound, often based on centuries of empirical observation and careful experimentation. They knew which roots to dig, which leaves to steep, which barks to grind, and the precise ailments each could address. This wasn't guesswork. It was a sophisticated, holistic approach to wellness, integrating physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Your knowledge as a healer would begin early, often by shadowing elder women, grandmothers, and aunts. You would learn to identify hundreds of plants, their seasons, their habitats, and their specific uses. You'd understand how to prepare them, whether to make a poultice for a wound, a tea for digestion, or a smoke for respiratory issues. This required not only sharp observation, but also a prodigious memory and a deep respect for the subtle power of nature. It's like being a botanist, a chemist, and a pharmacist all rolled into one, but without a single lab coat. For instance, the use of willow bark for pain relief was common among many tribes, long before Western medicine isolated its active compound, salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin. Or consider the application of various plant materials to stop bleeding or disinfect wounds. These weren't random discoveries. They were the result of meticulous, generations-long research and development. Historians still debate the specific efficacy of certain traditional remedies compared to modern pharmaceuticals, but the profound impact of these healing practices on community health is undisputed. Beyond herbal remedies, women often employed other healing modalities. They might use massage, cupping, or even primitive forms of surgery for certain conditions. They understood the importance of hygiene, using natural cleansers and practices to prevent infection, and critically, they recognized the link between physical health and emotional or spiritual well-being. A healing ceremony might involve not just a plant medicine, but also prayer, song, and storytelling to address the spiritual roots of an illness. You weren't just treating symptoms, you were treating the whole person. The role of a midwife was also almost exclusively held by women, a position of immense trust and importance. They guided pregnant women through childbirth, offering comfort, support, and practical assistance. They knew which herbs could aid labor, how to manage complications, and how to care for both mother and newborn in the crucial postpartum period. This intimate knowledge of female physiology and the miracle of birth made them indispensable figures in every community. Their calm presence and ancient wisdom brought solace and safety to one of life's most vulnerable moments. So, whether you were tending to a child's fever, setting a broken bone, or assisting in a difficult birth, your hands and your knowledge were the front line of healthcare. Your dedication to healing was a profound act of service, rooted in a deep understanding of the natural world and an unwavering commitment to the well-being of your people. It's a legacy of care and wisdom that continues to resonate today. As the whispers of the night deepened, and perhaps the scent of wood smoke still lingered in the air, your hands, tired from the day's practical labours, would often turn to another essential realm: art and craft. This wasn't just a leisure activity, it was a profound expression of culture, identity, and spirit, transforming raw materials into objects of beauty, utility, and deep meaning. You weren't merely a craftswoman, you were an artist, a storyteller, and a keeper of visual heritage. Imagine, for a moment, the vast array of materials you'd work with: clay from the riverbanks, plant fibres from the marshes, animal hides from the hunt, quills from the porcupine, even tiny shells or fragments of stone. Each material demanded a unique skill set and a respectful understanding of its properties. There was no mass production line. Every single piece was handcrafted, imbued with patience, skill, and often spiritual intention. Take pottery, for instance. In many tribes, particularly in the southwest among the Pueblo peoples, pottery was almost exclusively the domain of women. You would learn how to select and process the right kind of clay, how to coil it meticulously into various shapes from large storage jars to cooking pots and ceremonial vessels, and how to smooth and polish the surfaces. Then would come the firing, often in outdoor pits, a delicate process requiring precise control over temperature. And finally, the painting, using natural pigments derived from minerals and plants to create intricate geometric patterns, animal motifs, or sacred symbols. Each pot wasn't just a container, it was a canvas, telling stories, depicting cosmology, or simply celebrating the beauty of the world. It's a creative process that puts your ceramic coffee mug to shame, isn't it? Or consider basket weaving, a craft practiced by women across nearly all Native American cultures, albeit with vastly different styles and materials. From the tightly coiled baskets of California tribes, so waterproof they could hold water, to the practical burden baskets of the plateau peoples, each basket was a masterpiece of engineering and artistry. You would spend countless hours gathering and preparing the materials: willow, cedar, spruce root, bare grass, then painstakingly weaving them into complex patterns. These patterns were often unique to your tribe or even your family, serving as visual signatures. Historians still debate the specific symbolic meanings of certain patterns across different weaving traditions, highlighting their rich cultural depth. And we can't forget quillwork and beadwork, stunning forms of adornment that transformed utilitarian items into works of art. As mentioned before, porcupine quills were softened, dyed with natural plant dyes, and then flattened and stitched onto hides or birch bark, creating dazzling, colourful designs. Later, with the arrival of European trade, glass beads became a new, vibrant medium. You would spend endless hours meticulously stitching tiny beads onto clothing, bags, and ceremonial objects, creating incredibly intricate patterns that could convey status, clan affiliation, or spiritual messages. This wasn't just decorative, it was a form of visual language, a way to communicate and celebrate identity. It's like wearing your autobiography, but far more beautiful. Even everyday tools and implements, made by women for household use, often possessed an aesthetic quality beyond their mere function. A well-carved wooden spoon, a beautifully adorned cradle board, a meticulously crafted doll for a child. These all spoke to the pervasive artistic sensibility that infused women's work. This wasn't a world where art was confined to galleries. It was an integral part of living, a continuous act of creation that beautified and enriched every aspect of life. So, while your hands might have been strong from farming and building, they were also nimble and precise, capable of transforming raw nature into exquisite artifacts. Through your art and craft, you not only provided for your community's needs, but also preserved its history, expressed its spirit, and celebrated its unique identity. It's a legacy of creativity and skill that continues to inspire awe. With dawn breaking, painting the sky with soft hues, your personal life, particularly in matters of the heart and hearth, was far from the romanticized ideals often depicted in stories. For women in Native American tribes, marriage customs were rarely about grand gestures of individual love, as we understand them today. Instead, they were deeply practical arrangements, often serving the larger needs of the community, forging alliances, and ensuring the continuity of family lines. You weren't just choosing a partner, you were strengthening the entire social fabric. Imagine a world where compatibility wasn't primarily measured by shared hobbies or witty banter, but by a person's skills, work ethic, and ability to contribute to the collective. Marriages were frequently arranged, either by families or clan mothers, based on what would benefit the family or tribe most. This could mean uniting two powerful families, strengthening trade relations with another band, or simply ensuring a good, productive partnership that would lead to healthy children and a well-managed household. It might not sound like a fairy tale, but it was a pragmatic approach to ensuring collective survival and prosperity. Historians still debate the degree of individual choice allowed within these arranged marriages across various tribes, but the communal aspect was undeniably central. The process of forming a union varied wildly from tribe to tribe. In some communities, a man might offer gifts to the woman's family, demonstrating his ability to provide and his respect. In others, particularly matrilineal societies like the Haudenosaunee, the woman's family held significant sway, and her consent, or that of her clan mother, was paramount. A quirky tidbit: among some groups, a period of trial marriage might even exist, where a couple would live together for a time to see if they were compatible before a more formal union was recognized. This pragmatic approach allowed for a degree of personal assessment rarely seen in other historical contexts. The exchange of gifts was a common practice, but it wasn't a bride price in the exploitative sense often found elsewhere. Instead, it was more of an acknowledgement of the value of both individuals and the new bond being formed. Gifts often flowed both ways, from the groom's family to the bride's, and vice versa, signifying the reciprocal nature of the alliance. This wasn't about buying a wife, it was about honoring the new kinship ties being established. Once married, your roles would be clearly defined, yet interconnected. As we've discussed, you would be responsible for domestic duties, agriculture, gathering, and crafting, while your husband might focus on hunting, warfare, and certain ceremonial duties. However, these roles were rarely rigid in the sense of one being superior to the other. Both were seen as equally vital contributions to the household and the tribe. You were partners in survival, each bringing essential skills to the table. It's like a meticulously choreographed dance, where every step has a purpose. Polygamy, particularly polygyny, one man with multiple wives, was practiced in some tribes, though it was often limited to chiefs or wealthy individuals. This wasn't necessarily a sign of women's subjugation. Sometimes it was a practical solution for labor-intensive societies, where more hands meant more productivity. Often, in such cases, the wives might be sisters, a practice known as sororal polygyny, which was believed to foster harmony and cooperation within the household. Imagine sharing your kitchen with your sister. Times 2 or 3, it could either be wonderfully cooperative or a recipe for domestic chaos, depending on the personalities involved. Overall, marriage was a cornerstone of tribal society, a means of perpetuating family lines, building social networks, and ensuring the stability and strength of the community. Your role within this structure was profoundly important, not just as a wife or mother, but as a crucial link in the chain of kinship and a contributor to the collective prosperity. It was a union not just of two individuals, but of two families, two clans, or even two tribes, bound together by mutual benefit and shared destiny. As the early morning light filtered through the dwelling, casting patterns on the floor, you might consider another fascinating aspect of Native American marital life that often surprises modern observers: the relative ease and acceptance of divorce and autonomy. Unlike many contemporary societies where marriage was an unbreakable, often oppressive bond, women in numerous Native American tribes possessed a surprising degree of agency when it came to ending a union. You weren't trapped. You often had the power to walk away. Imagine a world where leaving a marriage wasn't a social scandal or a legal battle, but a recognized, sometimes even common, part of life. While marriage was important for community stability, the well-being and harmony of the individuals within it were also highly valued. If a union proved incompatible, unproductive, or simply unhappy, separation was often straightforward and accepted. This stands in stark contrast to European societies of the same period, where divorce was often impossible, especially for women, or required complex legal and religious intervention. In many tribes, particularly matrilineal ones like the Haudenosaunee, the ease of divorce was particularly pronounced for women. Since the home belonged to the woman and her clan, a man who displeased his wife might simply find his belongings placed outside the longhouse door. It was a clear, unspoken signal: you're out. No lengthy arguments, no court dates, just a silent, definitive eviction notice. It's an efficient, if somewhat abrupt, method of marital dissolution, wouldn't you agree? Reasons for divorce could vary: incompatibility, neglect, laziness, or even simply a desire for a different partner. The primary concern was often whether the couple was effectively contributing to the community and maintaining harmony within the household. If not, separation was seen as a pragmatic solution rather than a moral failing. Children typically remained with the mother and her clan, reinforcing the strength of the matrilineal line and ensuring their continued care within the established support system. This minimized the disruption to the children's lives and provided a stable environment. A quirky tidbit: among some tribes, even temporary separations were common, where a spouse might spend time apart from the household to reflect or allow tensions to cool. This fluidity highlights a more adaptable approach to relationships than rigid, lifelong contracts. It's almost like a timeout for adults, but with significantly more impact on living arrangements. While men also had the ability to initiate divorce, it was often easier for women, especially in those societies where property and lineage flowed through them. This granted women a degree of autonomy and control over their lives that was truly remarkable for the era. It meant you weren't compelled to stay in an abusive or unfulfilling relationship. You had the power to seek a better situation for yourself and your children. Historians still debate the specific social pressures that might have influenced these decisions, but the framework for female agency was clearly present. This cultural acceptance of divorce also underscored the importance of individual happiness and communal harmony. A miserable couple could disrupt the entire household, affecting everyone from the children to the wider clan. By allowing for separation, tribes often prioritized the overall well-being of their members and the smooth functioning of their social units. So, while modern notions of romantic love and marriage can feel all-consuming, for Native American women, the emphasis was often on practical partnership and the freedom to pursue a fulfilling life, even if it meant ending a union that no longer served its purpose. It's a powerful reminder that traditional doesn't always mean rigid, and that respect for personal autonomy can manifest in unexpected ways across different cultures. As the campfire embers glowed, casting dancing shadows on the faces gathered, you might notice the quiet reverence extended towards certain members of the community, the elder women. Their presence wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated, revered for the invaluable wisdom, experience, and historical memory they embodied. For women in Native American tribes, reaching old age often meant ascending to a position of profound respect and influence. You weren't just growing old, you were becoming a living library, a guiding star, and a powerful voice. Imagine a world where wrinkles weren't something to hide, but badges of honor, each line telling a story of resilience, knowledge, and survival. Elder women were often the custodians of tradition, the living repositories of tribal history, ceremonial knowledge, medicinal remedies, and practical skills. They remembered the old stories, the ancient songs, the proper ways of doing things, and their memory served as the collective memory of the entire community. It was through their continued guidance that cultural identity was maintained and passed down to younger generations. Losing an elder was like losing an entire chapter of your history book, only far more profound. Their wisdom wasn't just academic, it was practical. They had lived through countless seasons, witnessed periods of abundance and scarcity, endured hardships, and celebrated triumphs. This lifetime of experience made them invaluable advisors on everything from agricultural practices and weather patterns to intertribal relations and personal disputes. When a difficult decision needed to be made, it was often the elder women whose counsel was sought and respected. Their seasoned perspective offered a calm, steady hand, drawing from a deep well of collective experience. Historians still argue about the precise mechanisms through which this authority was exercised in all tribal councils, but their influence on daily life and major decisions is clear. In matrilineal societies, elder women, particularly the clan mothers we spoke of earlier, held explicit political power. They weren't just consulted, they made decisions. They could appoint or remove chiefs, control communal property, and wield significant influence over alliances and peace treaties. Their age and experience were seen as qualifications for leadership, proving their judgment and dedication to the well-being of the people. This was a system where wisdom trumped youthful exuberance, a charmingly sensible approach. Beyond formal roles, elder women also played crucial parts in daily life. They were often the primary educators for young children, especially girls, patiently teaching them essential skills like weaving, pottery, or hide preparation. Their gentle guidance and extensive knowledge ensured that traditional crafts and lifeways continued. They also provided childcare, allowing younger mothers to participate in other communal activities. It's like having an always-on, highly experienced, and deeply loving support system for child-rearing. A quirky tidbit: in some tribes, elder women were even responsible for upholding moral codes and resolving disputes within the family or clan. Their respected status allowed them to mediate conflicts and ensure harmony, sometimes through gentle persuasion, other times through firm pronouncements. Imagine your grandmother settling a neighborhood squabble with an unassailable aura of authority. The respect shown to elder women was deeply ingrained in the culture. Younger generations were taught to listen, to learn, and to care for their elders. Their needs were prioritized, and their presence was a source of comfort and security. It was a reciprocal relationship. The elders provided guidance and wisdom, and the community provided care and honor. So, as you reflect on the lives of Native American women, remember that their journey didn't diminish with age. Instead, it blossomed into a period of profound influence and reverence, where their accumulated wisdom became the guiding light for the entire community. They were the anchors of tradition, the keepers of memory, and the enduring heart of their people. In the stillness of the night, as faint sounds of the natural world might reach your ears, it's worth considering how Native American women navigated a sphere often perceived as exclusively male: war and peace. While men were typically the warriors and diplomats in formal councils, women held powerful, albeit often indirect, influence over tribal conflicts, alliances, and peacemaking efforts. Their roles were subtle, yet undeniably crucial, proving that power takes many forms. Think of the stakes involved. A decision to go to war or to make peace profoundly impacted every member of the tribe. For women, this meant potential loss of husbands, sons, and brothers, disruption of daily life, and the very real threat of attack or displacement. Given these profound consequences, it's no surprise that their voices, often expressed through informal channels or through the authority of clan mothers, carried immense weight in these critical deliberations. You weren't on the battlefield, but your family and home were often the reason for the battle, or the ultimate beneficiaries of peace. In many societies, particularly matrilineal ones, women held the ultimate say in whether a war party would be sanctioned or whether captives would be adopted or executed. Among the Haudenosaunee, for example, clan mothers had the power to prevent their sons from going to war, and their decision could halt an expedition. They were also instrumental in deciding the fate of prisoners of war, often having the final word on whether they would be integrated into the tribe or put to death. This gave them immense moral authority, acting as the conscience of the Confederacy when it came to life and death decisions. This is a level of anti-war protest power that modern activists can only dream of. Women also played a crucial role in sustaining warriors during conflict. They were responsible for preparing food, making and repairing clothing, and providing medicinal care for the injured. Their consistent labor ensured that fighting men were well supplied and healthy enough to protect the tribe. Without their efforts on the home front, sustained military action would have been impossible. It's the behind-the-scenes logistical mastery that often goes unnoticed, but is absolutely vital. Moreover, women frequently acted as peacemakers and diplomats. They might initiate peace talks by sending messages or gifts to opposing tribes, or by leveraging kinship ties that crossed tribal boundaries. In some instances, marriages were strategically arranged between tribes to solidify alliances and prevent future conflicts. As the facilitators of these unions and the mothers of the resulting children, women literally embodied the bonds of peace. A fascinating aspect is how female captives, once adopted into a new tribe, could sometimes serve as conduits for peace, linking their birth tribe with their adopted one, a rather unique form of diplomacy. Historians still debate the frequency and directness of women's involvement in formal treaty negotiations across all tribes, but their indirect impact on diplomatic outcomes is well documented. Consider the quieter, yet powerful influence of lamentations. If a tribe was suffering significant losses in battle, the public mourning and expressions of grief by women could serve as a powerful signal to male leaders that enough was enough, influencing a decision to seek peace. Their emotional and spiritual authority provided a crucial counterbalance to the aggressive impulses sometimes associated with male warrior societies. The contribution of women to the spheres of war and peace demonstrates that leadership and power weren't confined to overt displays of strength. Instead, it encompassed a nuanced understanding of social dynamics, a deep commitment to the well-being of the community, and the moral courage to guide decisions that shaped the very survival of their people. Their quiet strength was often the force that ultimately brought balance and continuity to tribal life. As the echoes of past conflicts might fade, a grim reality, far more terrifying than any tribal skirmish, could suddenly shatter the peace: captivity. For women in Native American tribes, the threat of being captured by an enemy tribe, or, later, by European colonizers, was a constant, terrifying possibility. Yet, in the face of such an unthinkable ordeal, their resilience and capacity for adaptation often shone through in astonishing ways. You weren't just a victim, you were a survivor, often forced to forge a new life in unimaginable circumstances. Imagine the sudden chaos of a raid: screams, fire, the terror of being torn from your family, your home, everything familiar. The initial experience of capture was brutal, involving forced marches, exposure, and profound psychological trauma. But what happened next varied greatly depending on the capturing tribe and their customs. Unlike European practices of enslavement, which often aimed for permanent chattel slavery and dehumanization, many Native American tribes practiced a form of captive integration or adoption. This isn't to say it was easy or humane. It was still a traumatic displacement, but it offered a pathway to a new, albeit challenging, life. In many instances, captives, particularly women and children, were adopted into the families of the capturing tribe, often to replace members lost to warfare or disease. This was driven by a practical need to replenish populations, but also by cultural beliefs that saw the adoption of new members as a way to strengthen the lineage. You might be given a new name, learn a new language, and gradually be expected to assimilate into your new community. This process was often arduous, requiring immense emotional fortitude to grieve your past life while learning to navigate a completely alien social and cultural landscape. Historians still debate the true motivations behind widespread adoption practices across various tribes, but their long-term impact on tribal demographics is clear. A quirky tidbit: sometimes these adopted captives, especially women, could eventually attain positions of respect and influence within their new tribe, particularly if they married into prominent families or proved to be exceptionally skilled. There are documented cases of adopted women rising to become respected clan mothers, healers, or even influential advisors. This demonstrates an incredible capacity for cultural integration and personal resilience, allowing individuals to rebuild their lives and contribute to a new community, despite their traumatic origins. It's like being forced to move to a new country overnight, then somehow becoming a respected community leader. However, the experience of captivity was not always benign. Some captives faced harsh treatment, forced labor, or exploitation, especially if they were not formally adopted or if they resisted assimilation. And with the arrival of Europeans, the nature of captivity fundamentally shifted. European and later American forces often took native women captive for different purposes, as forced laborers, sexual slaves, or as bargaining chips in conflicts. This form of captivity was generally far more brutal and offered little to no hope of integration or eventual freedom, leading to immense suffering and loss of life. The narratives of women surviving captivity, whether by intertribal adoption or enduring the horrors of European enslavement, are powerful testaments to human endurance. They speak to an unyielding will to live, to adapt, and to find agency even in the most dehumanizing circumstances. Their stories, often untold or minimized in mainstream history, highlight not just profound suffering, but also remarkable strength and an unwavering spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The world, as you knew it, began to crack and splinter not from an internal tribal conflict, nor from a seasonal famine, but from an entirely alien force arriving on your shores. The impact of colonization, the arrival of Europeans, was not a gradual shift. It was a cataclysmic upheaval that dramatically and often tragically reshaped the lives of Native American women, tearing at the very fabric of their traditional roles and societal structures. You were about to witness and endure a transformation far beyond anything your ancestors could have imagined. Imagine your sophisticated, interconnected world, where women held vital roles in agriculture, decision-making, and spiritual life, suddenly being confronted by a culture that largely viewed women as property, relegated them to the domestic sphere, and dismissed their traditional contributions. This clash of worldviews wasn't merely a misunderstanding. It was a fundamental assault on the existing balance of power and gender dynamics within native societies. The meticulously woven tapestry of your culture began to unravel, thread by painful thread. One of the most immediate and profound impacts was the introduction of patriarchal norms. European colonizers, steeped in their own male-dominated societies, often refused to acknowledge the authority or influence of native women. They sought to negotiate only with male chiefs, bypassing the powerful clan mothers or female leaders who traditionally held sway. This systematically undermined women's political power and prestige within their own communities, gradually shifting authority towards men who could interact with the newcomers. It's like rewriting the rules of the game mid-play. Only the stakes are your entire way of life. The economic roles of women also underwent dramatic shifts. As trade with Europeans expanded, hunting for furs and hides to exchange for European goods became increasingly central to tribal economies. This elevated the importance of male hunters, while often diminishing the perceived value of women's traditional roles as agriculturalists and gatherers. Suddenly, your vital work feeding the community seemed less valuable in the eyes of the traders than a beaver pelt. This wasn't because your work was less valuable, but because the newcomer's economic system privileged different forms of labor. Historians still debate the extent to which native men themselves adopted these new hierarchies, but the pressure from European interactions was immense. Furthermore, the introduction of new technologies and goods, while seemingly beneficial, also altered women's traditional crafts. Metal pots replaced pottery, woven cloth supplanted laborious hide preparation, and manufactured tools diminished the need for traditional crafting skills. While some tasks became easier, it also meant a loss of traditional knowledge and the cultural significance embedded in handmade items. It's a bit like getting a robot vacuum cleaner, but then realizing you've forgotten how to hold a broom, and part of your identity went with it. The very concept of land ownership was alien to many native peoples who viewed land as a communal resource. Europeans, with their emphasis on private property, began to enclose and claim ancestral lands, disrupting traditional hunting grounds, agricultural fields, and foraging areas that women had meticulously managed for generations. This forced displacement and loss of access to vital resources directly impacted women's ability to provide for their families and maintain their traditional roles. Even the spiritual landscape was assaulted. Christian missionaries actively sought to convert native peoples, often demonizing traditional spiritual practices and undermining the roles of female spiritual leaders and healers. The spiritual authority of women, so central to many indigenous belief systems, was directly challenged and sometimes violently suppressed. So, as European ships multiplied on the horizon and settlements grew, the lives of Native American women, once rich with purpose and influence, became increasingly vulnerable. They faced not just physical threats, but a systematic dismantling of their social, economic, and spiritual foundations. This marked the beginning of a long and arduous struggle for survival, both physical and cultural. Following the initial shock of contact, an invisible, insidious enemy began to sweep through Native American communities, an enemy far more devastating than any European army: disease. For women, already grappling with the unraveling of their traditional roles, these imported illnesses brought unparalleled devastation, decimating families and entire tribes, and irrevocably altering the fabric of daily life. You weren't just facing cultural disruption, you were facing a plague, an unseen terror that stole your loved ones and left gaping holes in your world. Imagine a highly connected communal society with no inherited immunity to foreign pathogens. Diseases like smallpox, measles, influenza, and bubonic plague, brought by Europeans, tore through populations with terrifying speed and lethality. Within decades, some tribes saw their numbers reduced by 50%, 70%, or even 90%. Entire villages could be wiped out, leaving behind only the dead. It's like a silent apocalypse, where the air itself seemed to carry death. For women, the impact was multifaceted and devastating. As caregivers and healers, they were on the front lines, desperately trying to nurse the sick with traditional remedies that were often powerless against these new, virulent diseases. They watched helplessly as their children, their husbands, their mothers, the very people they were sworn to protect, succumbed. This constant exposure to sickness, combined with the emotional toll of widespread death, placed an unimaginable burden on their shoulders. Historians still debate the precise mortality rates for specific epidemics in different regions, but the scale of the demographic collapse is undeniable. The loss of life had profound social consequences. Families were shattered. Kinship networks that had provided support and identity for generations were broken. The death of elders meant the irretrievable loss of vital knowledge, traditional stories, ceremonial practices, medicinal secrets, and historical memory. Imagine losing nearly all the librarians in your community, along with the entire library. This cultural void was deeply painful and difficult to recover from, particularly impacting women who were often the primary custodians of this oral heritage. Moreover, the demographic collapse disproportionately affected certain age groups, creating imbalances that further strained communities. The loss of reproductive age women impacted birth rates, while the loss of children meant the future generations were dramatically diminished. The constant cycle of grieving and attempting to rebuild with fewer hands and fewer experienced individuals became a defining characteristic of life for many survivors. It made every new birth a miracle, and every healthy child a beacon of hope. The psychological impact was immense. Survivors carried the trauma of witnessing mass death, often feeling isolated and overwhelmed. The spiritual beliefs of some tribes were also challenged as they struggled to understand why their traditional medicines and spiritual practices seemed powerless against these unseen invaders. This led to periods of deep despair and questioning, even as communities fought to maintain their cultural integrity. Despite the overwhelming grief and disruption, Native American women continued to adapt and resist in various ways. They worked tirelessly to care for the sick and bury the dead, maintained what traditions they could, and sought to rebuild their families and communities from the ashes. Their resilience in the face of such relentless biological warfare is a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. But the scars of these epidemics, both physical and cultural, ran deep and would shape their lives for generations to come. As the invisible hand of disease continued its relentless sweep, another, equally insidious, force began to systematically dismantle your identity. Forced assimilation. This wasn't about outright warfare, but a calculated, generational assault on Native American cultures, particularly targeting women and children, with the aim of eradicating indigenous ways of life and replacing them with European American norms. You weren't just being colonized, you were being erased, your traditions demonized, and your very essence deemed uncivilized. Imagine a directive from a distant government decreeing that your language, your spiritual beliefs, your traditional clothing, even your family structures were inherently inferior and must be abandoned. This was the core of assimilation policies, primarily implemented through boarding schools and the imposition of Christian values. For Native American women, this meant an attack on everything they embodied as cultural transmitters, mothers, and spiritual leaders. The most egregious example of forced assimilation was the Indian boarding school system in both the United States and Canada. Beginning in the late 19th century, hundreds of thousands of native children were forcibly removed from their families, often with military force, and sent to distant, off-reservation schools. The explicit goal was to kill the Indian, save the man, a horrifying motto that perfectly encapsulated the genocidal intent behind the policy. Imagine the terror of having your child ripped from your arms, knowing they were going to a place where their language would be beaten out of them, their hair cut, and their cultural identity systematically stripped away. This profound separation ripped apart the sacred bond between mother and child, and between generations. Historians still grapple with the full psychological and cultural trauma inflicted by these institutions. At these schools, Native girls were specifically targeted for training in domestic servitude. They were taught to be housemaids, laundresses, and cooks, roles aligned with Victorian-era European ideals of womanhood, but starkly different from their traditional roles as agriculturalists, healers, or clan mothers. Their hands, once skilled in tanning hides or weaving baskets, were now trained for scrubbing floors and ironing clothes. This was not just vocational training. It was an intentional effort to break their connection to their cultural heritage and prepare them for subservient roles in the dominant society. It's like being sent to a finishing school where the only thing being finished is your cultural identity. Furthermore, these schools forbade native languages, punished traditional spiritual practices, and instilled Christian doctrines. Children were often given new English names, further severing ties to their ancestral identities. This had a devastating impact on native women, who were traditionally the primary educators and transmitters of language and culture within the family. When children returned from boarding schools, often years later, they had lost their language, felt alienated from their families, and were caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. This created profound intergenerational trauma that continues to affect Native communities today. The forced imposition of Euro-American gender roles also undermined the influence of women in their communities. As men were increasingly pressured to adopt farming or wage labor and deal with external authorities, women's traditional economic contributions were devalued. Policies like the Dawes Act, which broke up communal tribal lands into individual allotments, often allocated land titles to male heads of households, further eroding women's traditional land tenure and economic power. Despite these overwhelming pressures, Native American women showed incredible resilience. Many resisted assimilation in subtle and overt ways. They secretly taught their children their languages, performed ceremonies in hiding, and held on to their spiritual beliefs. They became quiet guardians of cultural knowledge, preserving what they could in the face of immense suppression. But the scars of this era ran deep, leaving a legacy of profound loss and an ongoing fight for cultural revitalization. As the relentless tide of forced assimilation continued its grim work, another fundamental shift began to define the lives of Native American women: reservation life. This was not merely a change of address, it was a profound, often brutal, confinement that severed their ties to ancestral lands, disrupted traditional economies, and imposed a new, oppressive reality on every aspect of their existence. You weren't just living in a new place, you were living under siege, a prisoner in your own homeland. Imagine being restricted to a small, often arid or undesirable parcel of land, far removed from your traditional hunting grounds, fertile agricultural lands, or sacred sites. This was the reality of reservations, established by treaties often broken, or simply by unilateral government decree. For women, this meant an immediate and devastating blow to their ability to provide for their families. Their deep ecological knowledge, honed over millennia, knowing where to forage for specific plants, how to manage wild resources, where to find water, suddenly became largely irrelevant within the confines of a limited, often depleted, reservation. It's like being a master chef suddenly confined to a tiny kitchen with only 3 ingredients and a dull knife. Traditional economic roles were fundamentally disrupted. Where women had been primary agriculturalists, gatherers, or processors of game, the reservation system often forced them into dependency on government rations, which were frequently inadequate and unreliable. The imposition of unfamiliar farming techniques or attempts to force nomadic tribes into sedentary agriculture often failed due to unsuitable land or lack of resources. This loss of economic autonomy was deeply disempowering, undermining women's traditional status as providers and contributors to the tribal economy. Historians still debate the extent to which these economic shifts intentionally aimed to subjugate Native women, but their effect was undeniable. The communal living structures, like longhouses or large extended family dwellings, were often replaced with individual, smaller houses, mirroring European family structures. This broke down traditional kinship networks and the collective support systems that had been crucial for women, especially in child-rearing and daily labor. The sense of shared responsibility and community solidarity was diminished, leading to increased isolation and hardship. A quirky tidbit: sometimes these forced housing changes led to the loss of traditional cooking methods, as open fires within dwellings were replaced by inefficient stoves, further impacting diet and health. Reservation life also brought new forms of social control and surveillance. Agents appointed by the government often wielded immense power, regulating everything from daily activities to religious practices. Women, who had previously enjoyed significant autonomy in many tribes, found themselves subject to the dictates of these external authorities. Their traditional leadership roles were often ignored or suppressed, further eroding their influence within their own communities. The psychological toll of confinement and dependency was immense. Generations grew up without the freedom to roam their ancestral lands, without access to traditional resources, and with their cultural practices often banned or practiced in secret. This led to widespread poverty, health crises, and a deep sense of loss and despair. Yet, even in these dire circumstances, Native American women continued to embody remarkable resilience. They became the quiet keepers of what remained. They preserved language through whispers, taught traditional crafts in hidden corners, and kept spiritual practices alive, even at great personal risk. They adapted, often finding new ways to generate income through beadwork or crafts, sold to outsiders, always striving to provide for their families despite the overwhelming odds. Their spirit was not broken, even as their world was profoundly changed. Amidst the oppressive confines of reservation life and the ongoing assault of assimilation, a new and complex challenge emerged for Native American women: education and resistance. This wasn't the traditional immersive learning of their ancestors, but a Western-imposed system that simultaneously aimed to erase their culture while offering new tools for navigating the encroaching dominant society. You were faced with a paradox. Learning the ways of your oppressor might be the only path to survival, yet it also threatened to sever your deepest ties. Imagine being told that your ancestral knowledge, passed down through generations, was primitive and that true enlightenment lay only in the white man's schools. This was the prevailing ideology behind the establishment of boarding schools and day schools on reservations. For many Native women, education became a battleground for their cultural identity. On one hand, these institutions aimed to civilize them, teaching English, vocational skills deemed appropriate for women, like domestic work, and Christian values. They were taught to read and write, skills that seemed irrelevant to traditional life but would prove to be powerful tools for future generations. The experience was often brutal. Children faced strict discipline, physical and emotional abuse, and the systematic suppression of their native languages and customs. Girls, as discussed, were trained for subservient roles, a stark contrast to the leadership positions many held in their traditional societies. Yet, even within these oppressive environments, a quiet form of resistance often took root. Students would secretly speak their languages, share traditional stories, and support each other in maintaining their cultural heritage. This act of quiet defiance, often spearheaded by young women, was a powerful assertion of identity in the face of immense pressure. Historians still debate the extent to which these schools truly succeeded in their assimilation goals, highlighting the enduring resilience of native cultures. A quirky tidbit: sometimes native students, particularly women, would use the very skills they learnt in boarding schools, literacy, organizational abilities, and an understanding of the dominant culture's legal system, to later advocate for their people. They learned to navigate the bureaucratic maze that confined their communities, turning the tools of oppression into instruments of resistance. It's like learning the secret code of your captors and using it to write your own escape plan. Outside the boarding schools on the reservations, women faced a different kind of educational challenge. The traditional ways of learning through observation and participation were disrupted as communal life was fragmented. However, many women became informal teachers, desperately trying to pass on language, stories, and cultural knowledge to their children and grandchildren, often in secret. They understood that the survival of their culture depended on these transmissions, even if formal education sought to undermine them. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw Native women begin to engage with external educational opportunities in more deliberate ways. Some sought higher education, becoming teachers, nurses, and later lawyers and activists. This was not a capitulation to assimilation, but often a strategic decision to gain the knowledge and credentials necessary to fight for their people's rights on the dominant society's terms. They were pioneers, breaking barriers and challenging stereotypes simply by pursuing intellectual and professional development. So, while the era of forced education was marked by profound suffering and cultural loss, it also forged an unexpected path for Native American women. They found ways to resist, to adapt, and to harness new knowledge, transforming themselves from targets of assimilation into powerful agents of change, laying the groundwork for future generations to reclaim their heritage and fight for justice. From the crucible of reservation life and the forced compromises of education, a powerful new force began to emerge among Native American women: activism and advocacy. This wasn't merely about personal survival anymore, it was about collective liberation, a fierce determination to reclaim sovereignty, cultural dignity, and justice for their people. You weren't just enduring, you were rising, finding your voice in a world that had long tried to silence you. Imagine the courage it took to speak out against a system designed to oppress you, to challenge powerful government institutions, and to demand rights that had been systematically denied for generations. Native American women, drawing on their deep traditional roles as caregivers, cultural keepers, and community leaders, stepped forward as powerful advocates. They understood implicitly that the health of their families and tribes depended on systemic change. Early forms of advocacy were often grassroots and community-based. Women organized to address immediate needs on reservations, such as lack of adequate food, healthcare, and housing. They formed benevolent societies and self-help groups, pooling resources and knowledge to support their families and neighbors. This communal spirit, rooted in their traditional ways, provided a strong foundation for broader activism. Historians still debate the precise tipping point that led to more organized, overt forms of political activism, but the decades of quiet resistance certainly laid the groundwork. As the 20th century progressed, Native American women increasingly moved into more prominent national roles. Figures like Zitkala, Shah, Gertrude Simmons Bonin, a Yankton Dakota woman, became a powerful voice for Native rights in the early 1902. She wrote extensively about the injustices of boarding schools and advocated for greater Native American self-determination, often working alongside other influential women. Her ability to navigate both native and non-native worlds, using her education to fight against the very system that educated her, was a testament to her strategic brilliance. The mid-20th century saw the rise of more organized movements. The American Indian movement, AIM, often captured headlines with its confrontational tactics, but behind the scenes, and sometimes on the front lines, Native women were integral. They participated in crucial events like the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969 and Wounded Knee in 1973, bringing their spiritual strength, organizational skills, and unwavering commitment to the fight. They were instrumental in establishing new organizations and guiding strategic decisions, often providing the emotional and logistical backbone for these movements. A quirky tidbit: during the occupation of Alcatraz, it was often the Native women who organized the collection and distribution of food, managed childcare, and ensured the daily survival of the occupiers, demonstrating their continued role as providers even in protest. Beyond direct protest, Native women became powerful advocates for specific issues. They fought for the return of ancestral lands, for the protection of sacred sites, and for environmental justice against extractive industries that threatened their communities. They campaigned for voting rights, for access to quality education, and for an end to the pervasive poverty and health disparities on reservations. Their advocacy was holistic, recognizing that all these issues were interconnected and vital to the well-being of their people. Today, Native American women continue to be at the forefront of social justice movements. They lead initiatives addressing the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, MMIW, advocate for tribal sovereignty in legal and political arenas, and champion cultural revitalization efforts. Their voices are powerful, articulate, and unwavering, drawing strength from generations of resilience and a profound commitment to their heritage. So, from silent endurance, Native American women emerged as a formidable force for change. They transformed their personal struggles into a collective movement, proving that true advocacy arises from a deep connection to community and an unshakable belief in justice. Their activism continues to shape the fight for Native rights and cultural recognition. Even as the fight for recognition and rights intensified, another crucial battle was being waged by Native American women: the vital struggle for cultural preservation. This wasn't merely about holding on to relics of the past. It was about safeguarding the very soul of their people, ensuring that languages, ceremonies, stories, and traditional knowledge survived generations of deliberate suppression. You weren't just a guardian, you were a living archive, diligently working to ensure that the threads of your heritage, no matter how frayed, would never truly break. Imagine seeing your language, the very vehicle of your unique worldview, slowly erode under the weight of forced English-only policies, or witnessing sacred ceremonies practiced for millennia being outlawed or demonized. This was the reality, and for Native women, who traditionally held central roles in transmitting culture, the burden and honor of preservation fell heavily on their shoulders. They understood that a culture without its language, without its ceremonies, without its stories, was a culture in peril. One of the most profound acts of cultural preservation was the tenacious effort to keep languages alive. Despite the severe punishments in boarding schools and the societal pressure to speak English, mothers and grandmothers would often speak their native tongues in hushed tones at home, teaching words and phrases to their children, even if only in secret. They passed down lullabies, traditional blessings, and conversational patterns, ensuring that the rhythm and spirit of their language endured. It's a quiet act of rebellion, isn't it? A whisper against the roar of assimilation. Historians still debate the optimal strategies for language revitalization, but the dedication of these women is a consistent theme. Beyond language, women were instrumental in preserving traditional ceremonies and spiritual practices. When public ceremonies were banned, they found ways to practice them in hidden places, passing down the intricate details of rituals, songs, and dances from memory. They adapted, sometimes subtly altering practices to avoid detection, but always maintaining the core essence of their spiritual beliefs. They understood that these ceremonies were not just rituals, they were the lifeline connecting them to their ancestors, their lands, and the spiritual world. A quirky tidbit. In some instances, seemingly innocuous craft activities, like specific weaving patterns or beadwork designs, secretly encoded spiritual narratives or tribal histories, allowing cultural knowledge to persist right under the nose of colonial authorities. Women also tirelessly preserved and transmitted traditional knowledge, from medicinal plant uses to sustainable ecological practices, from intricate craft techniques to complex storytelling traditions. They taught younger generations how to make traditional foods, prepare hides, weave baskets, and create regalia, ensuring that these vital skills and the stories embedded within them would not be lost. This hands-on intergenerational teaching was critical, acting as a living library of cultural expertise. The act of storytelling itself became a powerful tool of preservation. Grandmothers would gather children around firesides, or simply during daily chores, and recount the ancient myths, historical narratives, and moral lessons of their people. These stories carried the weight of history, the wisdom of the elders, and the humor of their communities, ensuring that the collective memory of the tribe remained vibrant. It's like having an entire epic poem recited to you, lovingly by heart every single night. Even in contemporary times, Native American women are at the forefront of cultural revitalization movements. They lead language immersion programs, establish cultural centers, organize traditional arts, workshops, and work to reclaim sacred sites. They are publishing books, creating documentaries, and using modern technology to share their traditions with a wider audience, ensuring that their vibrant cultures not only survive, but thrive. So, through generations of hardship, Native American women stood as unwavering sentinels of their heritage. Their quiet persistence, their profound knowledge, and their tireless efforts ensured that the flame of their culture, though flickering at times, never truly went out. Their legacy is one of enduring spirit and a profound commitment to keeping their identity alive. As Native American women fought tirelessly to preserve their culture, they also faced the harsh realities of a dramatically shifting economic landscape. The traditional subsistence economies, based on hunting, gathering, and agriculture were irrevocably altered by colonization, forcing women to adapt to new, often challenging, forms of labor and economic contribution. You weren't just nurturing traditions, you were navigating a new world where money, not just resources, dictated survival. Imagine your customary work, cultivating fields, processing game, crafting intricate goods, suddenly devalued or rendered impossible by confinement to reservations and the imposition of a cash economy. The introduction of wage labor fundamentally reshaped daily life. For many Native American women, this meant seeking work outside their traditional roles, often in highly exploitative conditions, simply to feed their families. It was a stark contrast to their previous economic autonomy. Historians still debate the precise long-term economic effects of these shifts on women's status within their communities, but the immediate hardship was immense. One common avenue for economic survival was domestic work. Native women often found employment as housekeepers, laundresses, and nannies in non-native towns and cities surrounding reservations. This work was arduous, poorly paid, and often involved long hours and significant travel away from their families. It represented a stark departure from their communal, self-directed labor, placing them in subservient positions within the homes of their colonizers. A quirky tidbit: some women would strategically use these opportunities to gather information about the dominant society, learning its ways and sometimes subtly influencing decisions through their proximity to powerful families. Another significant economic adaptation was the production of crafts for sale. Women who had once created beautiful pottery, baskets, beadwork, and textiles for internal tribal use or ceremonial purposes began to produce these items for a tourist market. While this provided much-needed income and allowed for the continuation of traditional skills, it also commodified their art, and sometimes led to pressure to adapt designs for non-native tastes. This was a complex negotiation, leveraging their cultural heritage for economic survival, even as that heritage was being suppressed. It's like being forced to turn your cherished family recipes into fast food, but needing the income to keep your family fed. In some areas, Native women also engaged in agricultural wage labor, working on farms owned by non-natives, or participating in seasonal harvests like fruit picking. This was often back-breaking work, paid meagerly, and subjected them to harsh conditions. Yet, for many, it was the only viable way to earn cash needed for essentials not available through traditional means or inadequate government rations. The economic shifts were not uniform. In tribes where commercial fishing, logging, or ranching became dominant industries, women's roles might be less direct in terms of wage earning, but they continued to support these activities through their domestic labor, food preparation, and community organization. They managed the household finances, stretched meager resources, and adapted family life to the new economic realities, often displaying incredible ingenuity and resourcefulness. Despite the challenges, these economic adaptations demonstrated Native American women's remarkable resilience and agency. They weren't passive victims of these changes. They actively sought ways to provide for their families and communities, even under immense pressure. Their ability to navigate and find opportunities within a radically transformed economic landscape is a testament to their enduring strength and adaptability. Amidst the sweeping economic and social transformations, another profound shift was occurring, deeply impacting the very essence of identity within Native American communities: the evolution of gender roles. The clear, complementary divisions of labor and influence that had defined pre-colonial life began to blur, fracture, and sometimes, regrettably, reinforce patriarchal norms introduced by the dominant society. You weren't just adapting your work, you were navigating a renegotiation of who you were and where you stood, in a world that was constantly shifting underfoot. Imagine a societal structure where gender roles were distinct but equally valued, where women's contributions in agriculture and domestic life were seen as just as vital as men's in hunting and warfare. This was the traditional balance in many Native American tribes. However, colonization often imposed a rigid, hierarchical view of gender, one where men were considered superior and women were relegated to a subservient domestic sphere. This external pressure systematically undermined the traditional authority and respect afforded to Native women. Historians still actively debate the precise ways in which external pressures interacted with pre-existing gender dynamics in various tribes, acknowledging the complexity of these transformations. The imposition of a cash economy, for instance, often favored male labor in industries like logging, mining, or commercial farming, providing men with direct access to wages. This could inadvertently reduce women's economic standing, as their traditional, often unpaid, labor in subsistence farming or crafting for communal use was not recognized or valued in the same monetary terms. This economic imbalance sometimes led to a shift in domestic power dynamics, as men became the primary wage earners and therefore, in the eyes of the colonizers, the heads of household. It's like suddenly being told your vital work in maintaining a complex garden is worth less than someone else's factory job. However, Native women often found ways to adapt and resist these imposed gender norms. As discussed, they embraced new economic activities like selling crafts or working domestically, demonstrating their continued capacity for economic contribution and resilience. In many instances, they became the financial backbone of their families, quietly supporting households through their labor, even as traditional male roles were disrupted by reservation, life and loss of traditional activities. A quirky tidbit: some women became adept at navigating the bureaucratic systems of the Indian agencies, often acting as intermediaries between their communities and external authorities, effectively exercising a form of political influence through their administrative skills. Furthermore, while external pressures aim to diminish women's political and spiritual roles within their own communities, many women continued to hold significant sway, particularly the elder women and clan mothers. They maintained traditional practices in secret, continued to guide family decisions, and often served as the moral compass for their people. The shift was often more about how outside powers perceived and interacted with Native leadership, rather than an internal loss of respect for women's inherent power within their own cultural systems. The fluidity of gender roles also varied across tribes. Some tribes traditionally recognized more than two genders, or had roles for individuals who embodied both masculine and feminine spirits, often referred to as two-spirit individuals. The arrival of rigid European gender binaries and the associated prejudice against anything outside these norms further complicated indigenous understandings of gender and sexuality, creating additional layers of pressure and suppression. Ultimately, the evolution of gender roles for Native American women during and after colonization was a complex and often painful process. It involved both the imposition of new hierarchies and the fierce, quiet resistance to maintain traditional values and power structures. Despite the immense challenges, Native women continued to demonstrate incredible adaptability and an enduring commitment to their families and cultures, proving that their strength was not easily defined or contained by external forces. Beyond the internal dynamics of their own communities, Native American women also played critical, often overlooked, roles in shaping intertribal relations. This wasn't just about avoiding conflict. It was about forging intricate webs of diplomacy, trade, and kinship that spanned vast distances and ensured the broader stability and prosperity of diverse indigenous nations. You weren't just a member of your tribe, you were a vital thread in a complex tapestry of relationships that stretched across the continent. Imagine a world where treaties weren't just signed by men in council, but woven into the very fabric of family ties and economic exchange, often facilitated by women. While male chiefs and warriors frequently engaged in overt diplomacy or warfare, women's roles were crucial in maintaining peace, fostering trade, and solidifying alliances through marriage. These strategic marriages, where a woman from one tribe married into another, served as powerful political bonds, creating kinship networks that obligated both tribes to mutual support and non-aggression. It's a far more personal and enduring form of diplomacy than simply signing a document. Women were also central to intertribal trade networks. They were the producers of many valuable trade goods: baskets, pottery, woven textiles, processed hides, and agricultural surplus. Their expertise in these crafts and their knowledge of traditional food processing made them indispensable to long-distance exchange. Imagine carrying valuable goods across vast territories, meeting women from other tribes, exchanging not just items but also knowledge, stories, and cultural practices. These trade routes were arteries of commerce and communication, and women were often the beating heart of their flow. Historians still debate the specific economic scale of these intertribal trade networks, but their social and cultural significance is undeniable. Beyond formal trade, the exchange of knowledge and cultural practices between tribes often occurred through women. When women married into new tribes or were adopted as captives, as we discussed earlier, they brought with them their language, stories, songs, and skills. This cultural diffusion led to the sharing of agricultural techniques, medicinal knowledge, artistic styles, and even spiritual practices, enriching the diversity of indigenous cultures across the continent. A quirky tidbit: certain specific patterns in pottery or beadwork can be traced across multiple tribes, suggesting a fascinating artistic exchange program, often facilitated by women. Moreover, in times of conflict, Native women sometimes acted as mediators and peacemakers. Their positions as mothers and nurturers often gave them a moral authority that transcended the immediate hostilities. They might intervene to stop a raid, advocate for the adoption of captives instead of their execution, or initiate calls for truce. Their laments for the fallen could also serve as powerful catalysts for peace, signaling to male leaders that the cost of continued warfare was too high. The very concept of kinship, so central to Native American societies, often extended beyond individual tribes to create broader alliances. Women, as the anchors of family and clan structures, were instrumental in forging and maintaining these wider kinship bonds. Their influence ensured that relationships between different nations were often viewed not just as political arrangements, but as extensions of family, bound by mutual respect and obligation. So, while history often spotlights male leaders and warriors in the narrative of intertribal relations, it was often the Native American women who quietly, yet powerfully, wove the intricate threads of diplomacy, trade, and kinship that sustained peace and cooperation between diverse nations. Their enduring contributions ensured that the tapestry of Indigenous North America remained vibrant and interconnected. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the land, another profound connection emerges that deeply defined the lives of Native American women: their intrinsic bond to sacred spaces and the very earth beneath their feet. This wasn't merely a place of residence or a source of resources. The land was a living entity, a spiritual mother, and the physical embodiment of their identity, history, and ancestral memory. You weren't just walking on ground. You were walking on history, on spirit, on the very essence of who you were. Imagine a world where every mountain, every river, every grove of trees held stories, where specific springs were places of healing, and certain rock formations were imbued with spiritual power. For Native American women, this connection to the land was particularly deep. As the primary gatherers, agriculturalists, and caretakers of resources, they had an intimate, hands-on relationship with the environment. They knew its cycles, its moods, its secrets, understanding that its health was directly tied to the health and well-being of their people. This wasn't merely stewardship, it was kinship. Historians still widely acknowledge the profound spiritual connection native peoples had to their lands, a concept often alien to European colonizers. Sacred sites, whether natural formations or places where significant events occurred, often held particular importance for women. These could be places for vision quests, for women's ceremonies related to fertility and childbirth, or for gathering specific medicinal plants that grew only in certain hallowed grounds. The act of walking on these lands was a form of prayer, a continuous acknowledgement of their ancestors and the spiritual forces that permeated the landscape. It's like your entire world is one giant, ancient cathedral, and every step is a pilgrimage. The loss of ancestral lands due to colonization and forced removal to reservations was therefore not just a physical displacement, it was a profound spiritual trauma. Being separated from these sacred spaces meant losing access to vital spiritual connections, to the graves of their ancestors, and to the very narratives embedded in the landscape. This cultural and spiritual dispossession had a devastating impact on women, who had long served as the keepers of these land-based traditions. However, even in the face of this loss, Native American women fiercely maintained their connection to the land, wherever they were. On reservations, they learned to find new sacred places, adapting their spiritual practices to new environments. They taught their children the importance of respecting the earth, of listening to its whispers, and of remembering the stories of their original homelands. Their spiritual resilience was profound, finding ways to maintain connection even when physically separated. A quirky tidbit: some women would carry small pouches of earth from their ancestral lands, a tangible link to their heritage that defied physical boundaries. Today, Native American women are at the forefront of the fight for land-back movements and environmental justice. They are leading efforts to protect sacred sites from desecration, to stop extractive industries from polluting their ancestral territories, and to reclaim management of natural resources. Their advocacy stems from this deep, inherited connection to the land, understanding that protecting the earth is protecting their people, their culture, and their future. Their voice in these movements is powerful, articulating not just legal rights, but the profound spiritual and cultural imperative to defend Mother Earth. So, for Native American women, the land was more than just ground to walk upon. It was the sacred source of life, spirit, and identity. Their unwavering connection to these sacred spaces, both physical and remembered, remains a powerful testament to their enduring spirit and a guiding force for future generations. As the narrative of Native American women unfolds, from profound strength to unimaginable hardship, one characteristic emerges above all else: an extraordinary legacy of strength and an enduring spirit. Despite centuries of colonization, disease, forced assimilation, and the systematic dismantling of their traditional ways of life, Native American women have not only survived, but have maintained a powerful connection to their heritage and a vibrant sense of identity. You weren't just resilient, you were indomitable, a living testament to the human capacity to endure and thrive. Imagine losing nearly everything: your land, your language, your traditional roles, your spiritual practices, and countless loved ones to disease and violence. Yet, through it all, the women of Native American tribes held onto the fragments, piecing them back together with unwavering determination. Their strength wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional, and cultural, rooted in a profound love for their families and their people. This isn't just a historical fact. It's a living, breathing testament to human perseverance. Their strength manifested in countless ways. It was in the quiet act of a grandmother whispering traditional stories to her grandchildren in a forbidden language. It was in the painstaking effort of a woman preserving ancient craft techniques, even when modern goods were available. It was in the fierce protection of their children and families in the face of poverty and discrimination. These everyday acts of resistance, often unseen by the dominant society, were fundamental to the survival of their cultures. Historians still grapple with fully documenting the myriad forms of everyday resistance employed by Native women, highlighting the subtlety and pervasive nature of their enduring spirit. The continuity of their spirit is particularly evident in their role as cultural bearers. Despite efforts to erase their languages and traditions through boarding schools, women continued to transmit knowledge, values, and practices across generations. They were the primary educators within the family, ensuring that the unique worldview, history, and spiritual beliefs of their people were not forgotten. This intergenerational transfer of knowledge, often done informally and outside official institutions, became the bedrock of cultural survival. It's like being the last living copy of an invaluable library, committed to reprinting every book by hand. Their spiritual resilience also played a crucial role. Even when traditional ceremonies were outlawed or driven underground, women maintained their connection to the sacred. They adapted practices, found new ways to honor the earth and the ancestors, and held on to the core beliefs that gave meaning to their lives. This unshakable faith in their own spiritual path provided comfort, guidance, and an enduring sense of identity in the face of profound disruption. A quirky tidbit: some women even managed to incorporate elements of Christianity into existing spiritual frameworks, not as a sign of conversion, but as a way to interpret new religious ideas through an indigenous lens, effectively indigenizing the foreign. Today, this legacy of strength is visible in the revitalization movements sweeping Native communities. Native American women are leading the charge in language immersion schools, cultural heritage centers, and efforts to reclaim ancestral lands and sacred sites. They are powerful voices in activism, advocating for environmental justice, addressing the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, MMIW, and fighting for tribal sovereignty. Their leadership is a direct continuation of the strength and wisdom passed down through generations. So, as you reflect on the journey of Native American women through history, you witness not just a story of survival, but a powerful narrative of enduring spirit. Their ability to adapt, to resist, to preserve, and to lead stands as an extraordinary testament to their resilience and a beacon of hope for all who strive to maintain their identity and dignity in the face of adversity. Their legacy is a vibrant, living force, continuously shaping the present and inspiring the future. Even with the powerful legacy of strength guiding them, Native American women in the modern era continue to confront modern challenges that are deeply rooted in the historical injustices of colonization. This isn't a bygone struggle. It's an ongoing fight against systemic inequalities, cultural appropriation, and disproportionate rates of violence and poverty. You're not just reading history, you're looking at a continued struggle for justice that persists to this very day. Imagine living in a country where your people's history is largely overlooked or misrepresented, where stereotypes persist, and where access to basic resources like healthcare and education is often tragically inadequate. For Native American women, these are daily realities. The long-term effects of forced removal, broken treaties, cultural suppression, and economic exploitation have created a cascade of socio-economic disparities that disproportionately impact their communities. This isn't merely disadvantage, it's the systemic fallout of centuries of oppression. One of the most pressing and devastating challenges is the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is not a historical issue, it is a contemporary epidemic. Native women and girls are murdered at a rate 10 times higher than the national average, and often their cases go uninvestigated or unpublicized. The reasons are complex, stemming from jurisdictional gaps on reservations, systemic racism within law enforcement, and a general societal indifference to the lives of Indigenous people. Imagine the constant fear, the gnawing anxiety of knowing your sisters, daughters, and friends are disappearing, and that justice is elusive. This is a profound betrayal of human rights. Historians and activists now widely acknowledge the historical roots of this violence in the dehumanization of Indigenous women during colonization. Poverty remains a pervasive issue. Many reservations lack economic opportunities, leading to high unemployment rates and dependence on often insufficient federal funding. This directly impacts Native women, who often bear the primary responsibility for providing for their families. The lack of infrastructure, from clean water to reliable internet access, further exacerbates these economic hardships, creating barriers to education and self-sufficiency. It's like being forced to run a marathon, but with ankle weights and no water breaks. Access to quality healthcare is another significant hurdle. Native communities often suffer from higher rates of chronic diseases, lower life expectancies, and inadequate access to medical facilities and trained personnel, particularly for women's health issues. The historical trauma of forced sterilization and medical experimentation also contributes to a deep-seated mistrust of the mainstream healthcare system. A quirky tidbit. Despite these challenges, many Native communities are actively working to integrate traditional healing practices with modern medicine, seeking holistic solutions that honor their heritage. Furthermore, Native American women continue to battle against cultural appropriation and misrepresentation. Their spiritual practices are often commodified, their images stereotyped in media, and their voices marginalized in national conversations. This constant fight for accurate representation is exhausting, yet vital for reclaiming their narratives and asserting their cultural integrity. Despite these immense and ongoing challenges, Native American women continue to fight. They are leading movements, advocating for policy changes, creating support networks, and rebuilding their communities with fierce determination. Their struggle is a testament to an unyielding spirit that refuses to be silenced or erased. From the crucible of ongoing challenges, a vibrant and powerful movement is gaining momentum among Native American women: revitalization and the future. This isn't just about enduring, it's about reclaiming, rebuilding, and reimagining, actively shaping a future where their cultures thrive, their voices are heard, and their inherent sovereignty is recognized. You're not just observing a historical legacy, you're witnessing a dynamic, living force determined to weave a stronger, more vibrant tapestry for generations to come. Imagine communities where children are learning their ancestral languages in immersion schools, where traditional ceremonies are openly practiced, and where indigenous art and philosophy are celebrated as profound contributions to global culture. This is the vision driving countless Native American women today, as they lead efforts to regenerate cultural practices that were suppressed for centuries. This isn't just nostalgia. It's an act of profound self-determination and healing, directly addressing the wounds of forced assimilation. Historians and cultural scholars are now extensively documenting these revitalization efforts, recognizing their critical importance. One of the most inspiring aspects is the language revitalization movement. Women, often elders who secretly retained their native tongues, are now at the forefront of teaching these languages to younger generations. They lead classes, develop teaching materials, and create immersive environments where children can grow up fluent in their heritage languages. This work is foundational, as language is seen as the heartbeat of a culture, carrying worldview, humor, and unique ways of understanding the world. It's like discovering forgotten musical scores and bringing them back to life, note by precious note. Beyond language, Native American women are spearheading efforts to reclaim traditional ecological knowledge. They are working to restore ancestral food systems, revive sustainable farming practices, and reintroduce traditional land management techniques that promote biodiversity and ecological health. This involves not just agricultural practices, but also sacred relationships with plants and animals, recognizing them as relatives and teachers. This holistic approach to environmental stewardship directly challenges mainstream industrial models, offering profound lessons for planetary health. A quirky tidbit: some women are leading projects to reintroduce traditional seed varieties that were almost lost, ensuring food sovereignty and cultural continuity. In the arts, Native American women are innovating while honoring tradition. They are creating contemporary art that draws from ancient forms, using traditional techniques to express modern experiences, and sharing their work on national and international stages. This artistic renaissance is a powerful form of cultural self-expression and economic empowerment, challenging stereotypes and showcasing the enduring creativity of indigenous peoples. You'll find their designs in fashion, their stories on screen, and their voices in literature, asserting their presence in every sphere. Furthermore, Native American women are leading the charge in policy and governance. They are running for political office at tribal, state, and national levels, bringing indigenous perspectives to legislative bodies. They are lawyers, activists, and organizers, advocating for tribal sovereignty, water rights, land protection, and social justice. Their leadership in organizations and community initiatives is transforming systems from within and challenging injustices from without. It's a powerful testament to their ability to adapt and lead in new contexts while rooted in ancient wisdom. The future, for Native American women, is not about passively waiting for change, it's about actively building it. It's about healing historical trauma through cultural resurgence, empowering younger generations with knowledge and confidence, and ensuring that their unique voices and contributions are fully recognized and celebrated on the global stage. Their vision is one of strength, resilience, and a flourishing future for all Indigenous peoples. As the final whispers of our journey settle into the quiet of your room, we reach the concluding moments of our exploration into the extraordinary lives of women in Native American tribes. This isn't just the end of a story. It's an invitation for personal reflection, a gentle urging to truly ponder the depth of these women's lives, their enduring legacies, and the profound lessons they offer us. You've walked alongside them, glimpsing their joys, their struggles, and their triumphs, and now that experience becomes a part of you. Imagine the strength it took, day after day, century after century, to nurture life, to sustain culture, and to resist relentless pressure. These women were not mythical figures. They were real flesh and blood individuals, with dreams, fears, and an unshakable connection to their communities. They remind us that true power often lies not in overt dominance, but in quiet resilience, in unwavering dedication, and in the profound act of maintaining culture against all odds. Their lives challenge the narrow definitions of power and influence that often dominate historical narratives, revealing a far richer, more interconnected understanding of human societies. Consider the contrast between their world and yours, the sheer physicality of their daily existence, the intimate connection to the earth and its rhythms, the reliance on communal support, and the deep spiritual understanding of their place in the universe. These are aspects that modern life often distances us from, yet perhaps there are echoes, subtle longings within us for that deeper connection. Their story isn't just about what they did, it's about what they embodied, a profound harmony with nature, a fierce commitment to kinship, and an unwavering spirit of self-determination. Remember the clan mothers, wielding power not through force, but through wisdom and the respect of their lineage. Recall the healers, who found medicine in every plant and solace in every ceremony. Think of the artists, weaving stories into every basket and bead, and reflect on the activists, who, against all odds, rose to demand justice and reclaim their heritage. Their experiences remind us that gender roles are not fixed, that societies can thrive with diverse forms of leadership, and that resilience can blossom even in the harshest conditions. Their legacy is not confined to history books. It lives on in the vibrant cultures that persist today, in the languages being revitalized, in the art being created, and in the powerful voices of contemporary Native American women. It's a legacy that calls upon us to listen more closely, to learn more deeply, and to challenge our own preconceived notions about history, power, and identity. Their strength is a beacon, illuminating the path forward for all who seek to honor their heritage and build a more just world. So, as you drift into sleep, let the whispers of their journey linger. Feel the strength of their hands, the wisdom in their eyes, and the enduring spirit that carried them through centuries. May their story bring you not just knowledge, but a deep sense of connection to a powerful human truth. Sweet dreams.